Hi everybody. Today I'm here to do a progress video and also talk about the books that are on my TBR for Gabby Reeds' Winterween marathon, which starts tomorrow. So to start, for the prompt of vampire book, the book that I'm reading is Coffin Moon by Keith Rawson. Gabby actually recommended this to me, and I'm pretty sure Jan Agaton also read it. So I'm very excited to read this. This is a new author to me this year. From the author of the exciting, suspenseful, horrifying Fever House, a Vietnam veteran and his adopted niece hunt and are hunted by the vampire that slaughtered their family. It's the winter of 1975, and Portland, Oregon is all sleet and neon. Dwayne Miner is back home after a tour in Vietnam, a bartender just trying to stay sober, save his marriage and with his wife, Heidi, and connect to his 13-year-old niece, Julia, now that he's responsible for raising her. Things aren't easy, but Miner is scraping by. Then a vampire walks into his bar and ruins his life. When Miner crosses John Valerie, a killer who sleeps during the day beneath loose strips of earth and grows teeth in the light of the moon, Varley brutally retaliates by murdering Heidi, leaving Miner broken with guilt and Julia filled with rage. What's left of their splintered family is united by only one desire, vengeance. So begins a furious, frenzied pursuit of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. From grimy alleyways to desolate highways to snow-splashed plains, Miner and Julia are thrust into the dark orbit of undead children, silver bullet casters, and a bevy of broken men transfixed by Varley's ferocity. Everyone's out for blood, gritty, unforgettable, and emotionally devastating. Coffin Moon asks what will be left of our humanity when grief transmutes into violence, when monsters wear human faces, and when our thirst for revenge eclipses everything else. I'm very excited to read this, and also, tonight, Matt and I started to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I figured that would be a good way to kick off Winterween. We watched the first 2 episodes, and since I never watched the show growing up, I'm very excited to watch it for the first time. I was more into Sabrina the Teenage Witch. That was my favorite show. The reason why I'm watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer is because Allison Hannigan was on Dancing with the Stars last year, and she was one of my favorite people. She was the person that I voted for the most. Danielle Fishel is my favorite person this year that was on. Allison Hannigan also plays Lily on How I Met Your Mother, which is another one of my favorite shows that is very similar to Friends. So if you're looking for a show that seems to be a modern version of Friends, start binging How I Met Your Mother. The next book on my Winterween TBR is Julie Chan is Dead. This is a reread. This was one of my top books of Summerween, which is Gabby's summer thriller and horror marathon. So this book is about a girl named Julie. She has a twin sister named Chloe, who's a social media influencer, who mysteriously dies. And basically, Chloe takes her place and joins Chloe's group of social media influencer friends. I really love the commentary this book gives on influencer culture. It's very prominent considering the fact that I consider myself to be a social influencer, although this channel is relatively smaller compared to the other booktuber channels that I follow. So, as I just said, this was a 5-star read for me last year, and rereading this again will definitely keep me out of a slump. The next book that I'm reading for Winterween crosses over with the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR, and it is The Austen Affair by Madeline Bell. This is for the prompt backdated 2025 new release. This came out in September, and it is about a movie being filmed. It's about a movie being filmed that's based off of Jane Austen's books. It sounds really fun. I picked this for the Friends TBR obviously because Joey is an actor, and I can see him being in a movie like this. The next Winterween book that crosses over with the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR for the thriller horror book prompt is The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. This is another reread. I kind of cheated a little and started this book before the beginning of the marathon, so I'm actually halfway done with it. I'm on page 220. And these chapters are not numbered, but I love this movie. I love this book. I think it should be a movie because I think it would be a really great movie. I've also read The Guest List by Lucy Foley and The Hunting Party. The Guest List is a 5-star read. This book is a 4-star read. The Hunting Party was a 4-star read. So in this book, we meet a girl named Jess, and she is down on her luck, so she goes to Paris. She goes to Paris, the Paris apartment. She goes to Paris to visit her cousin Ben, and when she arrives in Paris, she finds out that her cousin is missing. I picked this book for Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR because obviously the character's name is the name of the guy character who disappears. His name is Ben, and this is set in Paris where Rachel gets her job at the end of the series that she forgoes to be with Ross. And also, there's a few Paris scenes in the Murder Mystery 2 movie with Jennifer Aniston and Adam Sandler, which, if you have not seen that duology of movie series, that duology of movies, please go watch it. I have not seen season 4 of The Morning Show yet, so if you have seen that, please let me know what you think of it, because I loved season 3. I have to go back and rewatch the first 2 seasons, though. So, yeah, as I said earlier, this is a 4-star read. The next book I am reading for the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR is Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. This is set at a London boarding school that is very similar to Chiltern Academy. And this has been compared to the show Gossip Girl as the main couple in this book. BJ and Magnolia are constantly compared by other booktubers to Chuck and Blair. But I believe that Magnolia is also a good representation of Rachel Green from Friends because she's into fashion. I started this book before I went to volunteer at the Boys and Girls Club this afternoon, and I am on chapter 14. So this couple, BJ and Magnolia, gives off major Ross and Rachel energy with their toxic relationship, and I don't know if I can deal with that for 332 more pages, but we'll see what happens. The next book that I am reading for the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. This is chosen for the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR because obviously the student-teacher relationship is reminiscent of Ross and Elizabeth in season 6, and I picture their relation the relationship between Adam and Olive in this book would have been what Ross and Elizabeth's relationship would have escalated to if the rest of the student body had found out about them being together, because there's a scene in this book where there are no seats in the classroom, so Olive has to sit on Adam's lap. And when I first read this book a couple of years ago, I pictured that scene in my head and replaced Ross and Elizabeth into it, and it made me gag a little. But if, for those of you not familiar with the 3-episode arc of Friends episodes where Ross is dating his student Elizabeth, there's a scene in the first episode of this 3-part series where Ross's colleagues from NYU are in Central Park and they see Elizabeth and Ross together and approach them and mention to them how inappropriate the relationship is. I feel like they should have reported that to the dean of the paleontology department, because that would have gotten Ross fired, and that's what Bruce Willis's character Paul wanted to do. Paul was Elizabeth's dad. And every time I watch these episodes, it makes me very sad, because if you guys have been following Bruce Willis's dementia battle, he is not doing well, and he's probably going to pass away soon. Well, I wouldn't say very soon, but I mean, I remember when my grandmas had Alzheimer's, and they were at the point in their illness where Bruce Willis was at. So I'm feeling, even though I don't know Bruce Willis's family, I feel like I can connect to them in this way because I've been through this with my own relatives. So in The Love Hypothesis, I am on chapter 15, page 238. The next book on the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR is Me Talk Pretty One Day by David Sedaris. David Sedaris is a comedian who lives in New York City. I don't know if he was on Saturday Night Live, but I think his daughter Amy is on Saturday Night Live, if I'm not mistaken. So this is an essay collection that talks about various things like being on TV, growing up in, working in New York, going to college at an older age, etc. And the reason why I picked this for the Friends and Gilmore Girls TBR is because David Sedaris' humor is very similar to Chandler's. The final book that I am reading right now From Manhattan to... Well, it's not the final book because I'm rereading a couple of memoirs From Manhattan to Stars Hollow. I'll get to those in a little while. The next book in the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR that I'm reading is The Winners by Friedrich Bachmann. This is the third book in the Beartown trilogy, and I have really grown close to these characters over the past couple of weeks because I started to reread Beartown before the Christmas holiday. The character in this book trilogy that is similar to a Friends character is Maya, because she's a musician. She writes her own songs and plays the guitar like Phoebe does. Currently, I am on chapter 57, page 354. I am like 55% through this book. It's a long one. Okay. Actually, okay. The next book I'm reading was recommended to me by Sunny at a Sunny Book Nook. It's called Bad Nature. When Hester is diagnosed with terminal cancer on her 40th birthday, she knows immediately what she must do. abandon her possessions, and drive to California to kill her estranged father. With no friends or family tying her to the life she's built in New York City, she quits her wildly lucrative job in corporate law and starts driving west. She hasn't made it far when she runs into John, an environmental activist, and need a ride to different superfine sites across the United States. From 5-star Midwestern hotels to culture southwestern compounds, the two slowly make their way across the country. But will the revelations they experience along the way dissuade Hester from her goal? Ragingly singular and surprisingly moving, Bad Nature is a story of stunning detours and twists until its final destination. Part road trip novel, part revenge tale, part lament for our ongoing ecological crisis. It's ultimately a depth examination of the indulgence of holding grudges, moral ambivalence, and the eternal possibility of redemption. So this book was not originally intended for the Friends and Gilmore Girls TBR, but I would say that first of all, this book is set in New York City, which is a key factor for any book being selected for this TBR in the first place. But this character reminds me of Phoebe in a little bit of a way because her dad abandoned her when she and her sister were babies, and her stepfather went to prison. So I feel like this would be Phoebe in her 40s, like trying to avenge the wrongs of both of her fathers, maybe, because we see Phoebe's father in the episode where the grandmother passes away, and we only see him for that one episode and then never hear from him again. So let me go into a brief tangent. So I've been rewatching the Joey spinoff, and as much as I think Matt LeBlanc's character is funny to an extent, Joey's character does get grating after a while, and also his plot lines in the Joey spinoff are basically recycled from Friends, from when he's been struggling with his acting career, because basically he moves to California after Friends ends, and he gets a new agent who is played by Jennifer Coolidge. Jennifer Coolidge is my favorite character in a Joey spinoff, aside from his nephew Michael, who's a sort of a combination of Chandler and Ross, in my opinion. But yeah, I feel like after the Joey spinoff, Joey probably moved back to New York or moved to Paris to help we know in the Joey spinoff, and we know at the end of Friends that Rachel gets off the plane and gets back together with Ross, but we all know that in a previous episode, they both admitted to themselves that they were incompatible. So Rachel realizes she makes a mistake and then moves back to Paris because she doesn't really want to be in the same trajectory of being with Ross again, because it has caused her a lot of stress and anxiety. Because even in the episode where Ross decides not to get the annulment, you can tell that there's a line that Rachel says I could so easily freak out right now. And I think that Rachel went through a lot of generalized anxiety because of her relationship with Ross and how stressful it was for her and whatever. I'm sure there were other factors too besides that. But anyway, instead of the Joey spinoff, I would have loved to see a show about Phoebe that focuses on A, her family with Mike, but B, also her dealing with her trauma and dealing with how her parents, how her whole family situation was so messed up. I would have loved to see the triplets grow up into teenagers and young adults, because there's a scene in one of the episodes where Frank brings the triplets into Central Park, and they're cute kids, but I would have loved to see them grown up. And then I would have loved to see them interact with Phoebe and Mike's kids. But also, like, does Phoebe ever work things out with Ursula, or do they still continue to be estranged? Does Phoebe ever, like, I don't know. She meets her birth mom at the end of season 4 when they go to the beach. I would have actually loved to see them reconnect and maybe see if she reaches out to her dad again. And, like, I have a theory that so Chandler and Phoebe both have similar relationships with their parents, where they were abandoned by their fathers. I wish that in that episode, where it's the funeral for the grandmother, that there had been a scene put into there where Chandler is talking to Phoebe and they're bonding over their parents abandoning them, kind of like in The One with the Two Parties, where at the end of her birthday party, Chandler talks to Rachel in the hallway about having divorced parents. Like, I really wish that Phoebe had gotten that same type of scene with Chandler that Rachel got at her grandmother's funeral. But that didn't happen, and that was a missed opportunity for the directors of Friends, I think, which is a shame. So, in this book, I am currently on chapter 21, and I think it's probably going to get 5 stars, because much like the book, Something Wild and Wonderful, I just love the atmosphere of the Pacific Northwest and all of the... And I love the idea of the cross-country road trip, because not only do you get to see the scenery of the Pacific Northwest, but you get to see the scenery, like, all the states in between the Pacific Northwest and wherever they're going, where are they going? Oh, from New York City. She's traveling to the Pacific Northwest from New York City. So, yeah, I'm really enjoying this book. Anita Kelly is the author of Something Wild and Wonderful. The next book that I'm reading is something I just picked up at the library today. I am constantly looking for recommendations for books with disabled protagonists, and I found this LGBTQ plus romance book on a Instagram post about characters with disabilities, and I just love this book so far. I started it this afternoon before I went to the Boys and Girls Club. I'm not very far into it yet. I'm only on page 62, but there's still plenty of time for the relationship and the romance to build. In this book, we meet Andrea and Hallie. Andrea Williams has got this. The best summer ever. Last summer, she spent all her time in bed, recovering from her latest surgery for her cerebral palsy. She waited too long for adventure and thrills to enter her life. Together with her crew of ride-or-die friends and the best parents anyone could ever ask for, just don't tell them that. She's going to live it up. There's just one thing that could ruin it. Her best friend, Holly. Finding out Andrea's true feelings, so Andrea will fall out of love with Haley, even if it means during the entire Boy George, who keeps showing up everywhere with a smile. Do we want Andrea to succeed? No. Does she? We're not telling. So I'm really excited that this main character has cerebral palsy. I feel like she has a more severe case of it than I do if she has to have surgeries that make her have to stay in bed to recover for a long time. I don't think I've gotten into her diagnosis exactly, but it's summer here in New England. I mean, it's winter here in New England, and we had an ice storm yesterday, so it's good to read a summer book to wish I was someplace warm. Now we're moving into nonfiction. Back to disability activism. Not that we ever left that section anyway. So I borrowed this book from my neighbor Kathleen yesterday. It's called Tough as They Come by Sergeant Travis Mills with Marcus Brotherin, forward by Gary Sinise. Thousands have been wounded in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. 5 have survived quadruple amputee injuries. This is one soldier's story. So, this is the author of a local veteran who was injured in the war in Afghanistan. And the story of what he went through in the war is absolutely harrowing. And I'm so happy he survived in order to tell this story to us. It's very inspiring what he has gone through. Currently, I am on page 103, chapter 8. The next nonfiction book I am reading is a reread of one of my favorite nonfiction books from the Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR, Crying in H Mart by by Michelle Zauner. So I still have not listened to I chose this book for them from Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR because it definitely represents Lane Kim's character. This is by a Vietnamese musician who is the lead singer in a Japanese band called the band is called Japanese Breakfast. They're like an indie punk band. I have never heard their music. If you have, please recommend a song by them in the comments, and I will cue it up on my Alexa. So this is the story of Michelle Zauner finding out that her mom has cancer and dealing with the diagnosis and bonding with her through her illness. And she does end up passing away, I'm pretty sure. Currently in my reread, I am on page 108, chapter 9. The next nonfiction book that I am reading is a book I picked up at the library today that was recommended to me by Olive at A Book Olive. It's called The Last City of Z, A Tale of Deadly Obsession in the Amazon. And I actually picked this book up because I read this memoir last year and really liked it. So I'm rereading it again, and I'll get into that in a minute. The Lost City of Z is about, after stumbling upon a hidden trove of diaries, acclaimed New Yorker writer David Grant set out to solve the greatest exploration mystery of the 20th century. What happened to the British explorer Percy Fawcett in his quest for the Lost City of Z? In 1925, Fawcett ventured into the Amazon to find an ancient civilization, vowing to make one of the most important archaeological discoveries in history. For centuries, Europeans believed the world's largest jungle concealed the glittering kingdom of El Dorado. Thousands died looking for it. Over time, many scientists came to view the Amazon as a death trap that could never support a complex society. But Fawcett, whose daring expedition helped to inspire Conan Doyle's The Last World, has spent years building his scientific case. Captivating the imagination of millions around the globe, Fawcett embarked with his 21-year-old son, determined to prove that the ancient civilization, which he dubbed Z, existed. Then he and his expedition vanished. Fawcett's fate and the tantalizing clues he left behind about Z became an obsession for hundreds who followed him into the uncharted wilderness. For decades, scientists and adventurers have searched for evidence of Fawcett's party in the lost city of Z. Countries have perished been captured by tribes or gone mad. As David Grant delved even deeper into the mysteries surrounding Fawcett's quest and the greater mystery of what lies within the Amazon, he found himself, like the generations who preceded him, drawn into the jungle's green hell. His quest for truth and the stunning discoveries about Fawcett's fate and Z hard to enthralling. Of this enthralling narrative. The other two nonfiction books I have read by this author, The Killers of the Flower Moon and The Wager, have gotten 5 stars, so I'm very, very excited about this one. And now, moving into my next reread of nonfiction is We Will Be Jaguars. This was Reese Witherspoon's pick. This was the Reese Witherspoon's book club pick for November 2024, and it is the memoir of a woman who was in a Native American tribe in the Amazon rainforest, and it's about how she got chosen from her tribe to go to Britain to go to school and learn the ways of the British people, and also how she met her husband Mitch, who wrote this book with her. And it's about her growing up in the rainforest, and then the rainforest being like built up and developed by oil developers. So in my reread, I am on chapter 8. And now I'm going to talk about books that I borrowed from the library that I recently finished. The first book I wanted to talk about is called The Big Fix by Holly James. This book is a thriller. Is a thriller. When bookish Penny Collins reluctantly lets her sister drag her to an estate sale at a neighbor's house, she's hoping for a little diversion, rummaging through dusty antiques. Instead, she ends up in a public squabble over candlesticks with the deceased owner's nephew, Anthony, right before a dead body tumbles out of a closet. Penny's plan for the summer involved finalizing tenure at the university where she's been a computer science professor. Instead, she's suddenly on a run with a man she barely knows, scaling walls, evading bullets, and accidentally stabbing henchmen. It seems the wrong people have gotten in their hands, and that she's Anthony's girlfriend by association, in possession of something that they desperately need and will do anything to get. As for Anthony, he has a top secret occupation as a fixer, but a recent fix went dangerously awry, and now he and Penny are dodging both a ruthless billionaire and the FBI. and it will take all of Penny's plentiful savvy and common sense, in addition to Anthony's particular set of skills, to survive long enough for her to see the next semester. I loved this. It kept me on the edge of my seat, guessing what would happen next. And, it made me think of James Bond a little bit, only, modernized. So, I am giving this 4.5 stars. The next nonfiction book that I read was another book that was recommended to me by Olive at A Book Olive. It's called The River's Daughter by Bridget Crocker. A vivid and propulsive memoir about finding courage and meaning in a life outdoors by a world-class whitewater rafting guide. After Bridget Crocker's parents' volatile divorce, she moved with her mother from Southern California to Wyoming. Her life was idyllic growing up in a trailer park on the banks of the Snake River with a stepfather she loved, a new baby brother, and the river as her companion. Until her mother suddenly took up a radical new lifestyle, becoming someone Bridget barely recognized. Then, the one constant in her life, the place Bridget felt whole and fully herself, was the river. When she discovered the world of whitewater rafting, she knew she found her calling. On the river, Bridget learned to read the natural world around her and came to know the language of the rivers. One of the few female guides in the Snake River, she traveled to the Zambezi River in Africa. Some of the most dangerous whitewater in the world, where she faced death and learned to conquer her fears, both on the water and off. The river taught her how to overcome years of trauma and betrayal, to trust herself, and finally how to help heal her family from generational cycles of abuse and poverty. A beautiful rendered memoir of a woman coming into her own, The River's Daughter opens us to possibilities of transformation through nature. I loved this book, and I loved learning about Bridget and her journey with whitewater rafting and how she was able to heal from her trauma through her exploration of whitewater rafting. I have only been whitewater rafting once in my life for my senior class trip when I graduated high school in 2004. I had fun on that trip, but I also got bitten by mosquitoes and had my eyes swollen shut for my graduation ceremony, which was not quite as fun. This book gets 5 stars, by the way. Another 5-star read was recommended to me by Gabby Reeds. She read this book last fall. It is a science fiction book called The Merge. It's about Alzheimer's disease. Our main character, Amelia, has a mom who has Alzheimer's disease, and basically in this dystopian science fiction novel, there is a way for people who have Alzheimer's to merge brains, brainwaves or brains through surgery with their relatives who do not have Alzheimer's, to try to regain their memories that they lose through having Alzheimer's and dementia. As somebody who has lost 2 grandmothers to dementia and Alzheimer's, I loved the concept of this book, and I thought it was really cool that there was something being tested in this book to kind of find a cure for Alzheimer's. And I really wish something like that would actually happen, because Alzheimer's is such a terrible disease that seeing a relative, in my case 2 relatives, suffer from it was not enjoyable. And it was really hard to see both of my grandmothers suffer like that. The next book that I just finished reading is called The Everlasting. This is Alex E. Harrow's new release from the middle of October. It came out around Halloween time. This is a extension of her short story called The Six Deaths of a Saint, and it elaborates on the relationship between our main female protagonist. Her name is Una Everlasting, and Owen, who is her knight, or who is a knight in the royal court who is in love with her. This book kind of reminds me of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, or The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, because it's a romance about a character who, dies multiple deaths and comes back to life after death, reincarnated. I have never read the short story this book was inspired by, but I really enjoy the dynamic between Owen and Una, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. The other book that I read last year by Alex E. Harrow was a reread of Starling House that I read in October during Halloween. And I originally gave that 2.5 stars, but I think I was just reading it at a really bad time. And I ended up rereading it and giving it 4 stars. So the next book that I want to read by Alex E. Harrow is called... what am I saying? Okay, so the other books that I have read by Alex E. Harrow are A Spindle Splintered, which is a fairy tale novella that's inspired by Sleeping Beauty. I gave that 4 stars. And then The 10,000 Chores of January, which I gave 4.5 stars to. The last book that I just finished reading that I will be returning to the library soon is The Marriage Method by Mimi Matthews. She writes a lot of romance books that are set in the same time period as Pride and Prejudice, which I love. So this is the second book in the Crinoline Academy series. It's about people who are living in Victorian England, and they live in this boarding school type situation. Newspaper editor Miles Quincy sets great store by his reputation. Why is it so important to him that he gets his good name remains unblemished? How does the fact that he's a self-made man play into this? So, I think that how being a self-made man, how that plays into this is so he reminds me of Oliver Warbucks from Annie, though he's British. But I think his story of how he became a self-made businessman is very similar to Oliver Warbucks, how he grew up in poverty and then made his way up from that to where he is now with being a rich businessman. Nell spent her life at the academy, first as an orphan and then as a teacher. How does her history as an all-female institution influence her business? So I really liked Nell's development between the first book, and the first book, by the way, is called Rules for Ruin, which was last October's new release from this author, and I gave it 4 stars. So in the first book, we meet Nell, and she basically is adopted into this academy by the headmistress, and because she's an orphan. Her parents died in an accident, and basically in this book she is now an older adult woman who is a teacher at the school, and I think her upbringing from an orphan to somebody who is in high society really prepared her for her future as a teacher, because she is able to therefore inspire the younger people that she teaches about overcoming adversity, because she came from nothing, and through working with the headmistress at the school, she became, she learned a lot about dedication and hard work, and that's how she got to where she was. This book and the book that preceded it got 4.5 stars. So this video was originally supposed to come out next Saturday, and I'm still going to do another video next Saturday. I just wanted to get this video out first because of Winterween starting tomorrow, so I could announce what my TBR is. And the progress of the books in the Winterween TBR will obviously be in my next reading progress update video next week, which is slated to be out on Saturday at 3 p.m. But please be aware that there might be a possibility that that video might be posted earlier depending on where I am in the progress with these books. I hope you all have a great weekend and Happy New Year. I hope you guys had a safe and happy holiday season, and I will see you guys next week. Thank you. Have a good night.